economic data. So our presenter today is Davy Lee. So thank you very much for joining us, Davy.
Thank you.
And I'm not going to get into Townfolio. I'm going to let him do all of that for you. A couple of technical things before we start. If you do have any questions during the presentation, and these can be questions either for the presenter, if you would like Davy to clarify anything, or you have any particular questions. Also, if you have any technical problems during the webinar, if you can just write them in that chat box and we will try to answer them as fast as we can. And then some of the bigger questions we might save and we'll get to right at the end. Davy has also confessed a difficulty with getting very excited and speaking quickly during his presentations. So if you do need him to slow down, please just go ahead and type that in there and he'll do that as best as he can for us.
Thank you.
And then the last thing, just technically, if you can maximize your screen, Davy's going to share his screen with us for the presentation, and that always works better in your full screen mode. So if right now we're a little window, I would definitely suggest you open that up, and so you can really see the details as we go through a Townfolio. And without further ado, thank you very much, Davy.
Cool. All right.
Okay, so I'm going to pass this over to you now.
All right, I'm going to try sharing my screen here, and hopefully technology does not fail me, because I am a programmer, and that would be very embarrassing if it did fail me. Can everyone see my screen out of curiosity? Okay, perfect. So I'll get started with my presentation. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar with Community Data. I'm super excited to share with what we are doing at Townfolio and just educate you on what we're doing and see how there's application and synergies with community data and yourselves. So, oh, shoes. You think my presentation would work, but I'm going to open up my slider like that. So what I like to do is I like to just go over a quick agenda of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give you a background on me and my business partner and our team, a background on the company, a little quick product demo, and then basically identify and answer any questions that you may have. So I can't see the chat right now because I'm presenting, but if anyone has a question, I'm sure Mary will let me know.
Absolutely, I will. And David, maybe I'll just want to point out before you get going, please keep in mind while you're listening to Davy speak, that I think there's a great potential for relationship with Townfolio and with your community data program data. So just keep that in mind as he's going through and think about the potential of what you have in the data catalog and what Davy's presenting to you now. Okay, thanks, Davy.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. So what I'll do is give a quick background on the founders, basically me and Riley of Townfolio. We started this GovTech company about 3 years ago. We primarily initially focused on economic development, but have slowly branched out into other departments such as planning. I'll go into that a bit more detail after, but I'm the guy on the right here. I have many titles. I'm kind of like a jack of all trades, but I'm probably more engineering focused than I am business focused. But I grew up in Timmins, Ontario. Parents immigrated from China. We are both Techstars alumni. Techstars is a popular technology accelerator in the US where they take about 1% of applications and try to help them grow and expand their company. We went to Kansas City in particular just because we found there was a booming government technology sector there. And a lot of the government technology companies that I know of that are big in the US happen to have locations in Kansas City. And a byproduct of that is just because of the civil engineering companies that exist there. So that is a quick background on me. And then Riley, he is our CEO. He grew up in Neota, Saskatchewan, which is a very small place, as you can tell. And he has a background working in nonprofits and governments as well. So our background has been primarily in the public sector. I worked for the Irish government, and I've worked in international trade and whatnot. The next picture here is a picture of our team. So we have a team of about 7 people right now, and it's a team composed primarily of data scientists, economic development professionals, public sector professionals, and we're mentored by some of the top government experts and economists. To give context, one of our mentors was the former head of Bloomberg economists at Bloomberg. So we often reach out to him for advice and stuff like that. In terms of like what we do in a nutshell, what we do really well is we take a lot of data from various data sources and consolidate them into a database, and that requires a lot of cleaning and maintenance on our end. We have we call it an ETL data pipeline, extract, transform, load. That's what it stands for, and where we basically manage the entire data flow process and consolidate and scrape and collect data from multiple data sources that best fit our data pipeline. Oh, I just noticed there's some issues here. Full screen. I'm going to keep.
No, that's fine. Just
okay.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So we consolidate from a lot of data sources, and we try to consolidate them into a single API. What ends up happening is that we have a database that powers multiple tools that we create, and we've created a data platform for about 38,000 cities and towns and communities in Canada and the US. So we have a compare tool, we have a benchmark tool, we have something called a community profile tool, which I'll go into detail a bit later, and website data. So to give you a bit of background, we started initially by focusing on something called the community profile. And the reason we started focusing on that is when I worked for the Irish government, I used to help Irish companies expand into international markets. And oftentimes I found that talking to economic development was an easier way just to get a bit of insight about communities that they didn't know about that existed in Canada. So this is actually a community profile that I used to get, but this is something built by the city of Warman in Saskatchewan, built in 1987. And if you opened it up, it basically had information like a basic map, had some general demographic information along with a lot of other things. And when I learned about this, and I kept on getting about 50 of these, they become a bit cumbersome to analyze and go through. As you can imagine, there's about these community profiles come in 50%, 50-page PDFs, and it becomes cumbersome to manage. Actually, can you see my screen as a full screen right now? Is that better or?
That's better. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, awesome. I'm just gonna do that, and hopefully that helps illustrate what I'm trying to do. So we started by focusing on this one product because we found out a lot of economic development professionals had limited resources and smaller budgets. And what we did is we created a visualization tool, an online tool of community profiles that people can use to promote their community with. But as a byproduct of that, it's kind of evolved a bit and it's become more data-centric, which I'll show a bit after. But I want to illustrate some of the impacts that we've had with Townfolio thus far. So we've worked with Kindersley, Saskatchewan here, population about 4,500 people. And they signed on to Townfolio about a couple years back, and the CAO there has been using it for planning purposes and economic development purposes. And they had a client, a business, invest quite a bit of money into the community a while back last year, and they used Townfolio data to help facilitate that project. And they also used their data to attract a Sobeys liquor store to open up, which is the picture on the right. So we've been seeing a lot of use cases for our product, whether that's planning or economic development. But what I'll do now is kind of go into our coverage a bit. So since 3 years ago, we've primarily worked with a lot of communities in Canada, primarily in Western and parts of Southern Ontario. And we just started recently expanding into the US, particularly in the Kansas and Missouri state area. So I'm very familiar with government data. To give a bit more background on me, I'm a programmer by trade, really into data. So if you ever imagine those conferences where there's a lot of geeky engineers hanging out talking about data, every stereotype you could think of, that's me. And I present at these conferences, whether it's Python related, and one of my biggest passions is trying to innovate and applying some of those technologies into the government space as well. So what we'll do is jump into a demo, and I'll kind of have my screen open here, and hopefully you guys can see what I'm showing here. Actually, before I showcase, just to let you guys know, I'm based out of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And it's minus 28 here right now. It feels like it. I sometimes wonder why I moved here. But with that said, I'm super excited to get started with our product demo. So if you go on Townfolio today, what you'll see is something called City Data as a Service. That's how we position ourselves. We aggregate a lot of data sets from all over the internet, and then we try to consolidate that. And what a lot of people do is they'll come on here and they'll usually search a community and whatnot. So you can search by Canada or the US, but since we're in Canada, I'm going to do a Canada demo. So I'm going to use an example of Prince George, British Columbia. So what you do, if you search a community there, it'll take you to a profile that we've created. So this is a profile, the community profile that we digitized for the city of Prince George. What you see here is some target industries that they're focused on attracting, a video that can outline what's going on that they can showcase. Now showed my recommendations. Now you guys know I watch a lot of basketball. And then basically you can add like incentives, and it has a basic GIS map here that that people can use for various tools. The one thing though that we're really known for is aggregating a lot of data and visualizing it. So we have populations. A lot of the stuff you see here is census information, but what I want to highlight is that we're just not census information. There's a lot of other data sets as well. And what ends up happening is we end up working with the individual in a municipality, try to add more data that's not just easily accessible online. So an example of that might be, building permits. So this is building permits that we collect from the city of Prince George, and we break it out into a nice visual stack bar graph. And they use this for internal reporting and whatnot. And you can categorize it and showcase based on a category of what you want to visualize. On top of that, we also visualize data from other data sources. So that can be from CMHC, and we'll pull data from their platform and aggregate it into our data platform to get vacancy rate, average rents. Another popular data set is, some people always ask, can I get the latest real estate data? What we do is we'll normally try to get it from the MLS region board in the area. And if we have access to it, we'll take it and visualize that data as well. So as you can see, we basically aggregate as much data as we can. One example of something that Keenan here provides to us is airport passenger data. So this is stuff that you can't really find online. We worked with Keenan to try to get access to the airport authorities data and get it visualized here. What's also great is that you can also download and view this data. So if you want to view the data, you can see it right here. If you wanted to download the data as a PNG or just a JPEG, you can. If you want to download the Excel file just for that data, you can as well. So as you can see, I downloaded the image. You can have the image of that there. And then if you want the raw Excel data of just airport traffic, you can get that as well. And then what a lot of people tend to also ask is, can I export this into a PDF or an Excel document? We can. So if you were to click this PDF button, you can export sections of the profile to get what you want. And as a byproduct, when you press export, it comes in a PDF that's friendly to use, that people use for whether it's internal or external. And if you want to export all of the data, you can just easily press this Export XLS button. And what it'll do is open up an Excel sheet that has every data set that we have within our platform. So you can like kind of play with it and dig with it and however you want. Another thing that we're really popularly known for is aggregating other unique data sets as well. So this is an example of the city of Prince Albert in Saskatchewan. There are about, let me see, I think there are about like 40,000 people, 35,000 people. And what they wanted, we embarked on a project with their planning department to help them understand some of their health data. Now, this is one of those cities where not all of the regions play nice with each other or public bodies. So what we had to do was the health regions actually issued a yearly annual reports on their hospital performance, whether that's lab visits, emergency department visits, X-ray visits, home care visits, et cetera, ranges from speech therapy, addiction service usage, public health vaccinations. There was a bit of a dip there, but it recently spiked up. So what ends up happening is what we did is we went to the health region, looked at their annual reports, and parsed all the data within that annual report and visualized it in a format that they can use for whatever decision making. So now they're able to see like the uses of home care nursing visits have increased or consistently increased in the past few years. So that might be an indicator that they might have to do something on that. Home care meals is something that has not been used much in the past 5 years or so. It gives them an indicator of what is being used. And what we did is we parsed that data and made it incredibly easy for them to have access and to this information for them to visualize. Because otherwise they would have had to go through about 7 annual reports, look through about 80 pages of their annual reports talking about how great their health region is. And we just kind of cut to the chase and made it easy for them. The other thing too I want to highlight is, here's another community code, the city of Chestermere in Alberta. We work with Bernie. He's the CAO. We work primarily with the planning department. One of their biggest challenges was they had a lot of data sets available in the public and internally that they wanted visualized. So one of the things what they were curious about was student enrollment. So what we did is we got every grade from grade 1 to 12 and just visualized the data in a format here. And what they do if they want to see a particular grade, say like grade 1s, they can see the trend here in the past 10 plus years or so, and notice that there's a bit of a dip in grade 1 students in the past year, and they can kind of compare it to the other grades as well. So we helped that data came in a very ugly format, and we did some transformations and parsed it to make it a bit more useful. Another data set that they sent us that we actually were able to get online was the employment insurance recipients. I'm sure you guys probably have access to this in your community data portals. But what ended up happening is we took that data and made it useful. In Alberta right now, there's a bit of an oil crisis. I don't know if it's a crisis, but unemployment insurance recipients have increased quite a bit compared to previous years. So that gives them a way to help indicate on like what's going on in their local economy. Another common interesting thing was outside of the HCMHC data was they had residential permit data that they wanted to showcase, but they do it a bit differently. They don't do it by total dollar value or total permits issued. They do it on an average. So we got that data for the past while, past 10 years or 7 years, and we were able to visualize it by types. So if they wanted to just see what the trend was for single family residential permits issued, they can see that there's a bit of a trend going on. They also did the average commercial and institutional permits issued and minor residential developments. So it kind of gives them a sense of what's going on in their economy on a yearly basis. Another interesting one was builder stats. They actually had data on which home builders were active in their community. So you can do it by 2016 or just show the 2017 data as well. And also, I just want to say, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to type. I mean, I sometimes talk really fast, and if I see a question, I'll try to answer it as I go along. Another interesting data set was driver license data. We're able to get that from their open data portal, but it was originally issued by Department of Transportation in Alberta. And then we also got city data from them in terms of traffic accidents, in terms of number of vehicles, number of interest, and income levels and wage rates. So on demographics, we have income levels here. So we have the household income. We could break down and actually get more data on employment incomes. We can get wage rates. Those come from the job bank. We have at Scrape, some communities have asked to have that visualized. Chestermere not in this particular case, but that is data we're able to access as well, and income levels as well. One of the other things too, and feel free to type questions as I see them, I'll answer them. One of the things we're known for is, outside of showing what's on our platform, some people want to see, can I get that data that you have visualized and put that on my, municipal website? So we can. So here's an example of Chestermere. This is their own municipal website. So here's the demographics information, and as you can see, our technology powers their website here. And one of the things here was they had a municipal census, so we use that in place of other demographic information as well. Some people tend to ask, how hard is it to put this onto my municipal website? It's actually really, really, really easy. I'll have an email here of just showing how easy it is. This is the client. Someone asked where the data set's coming from. If we want to visualize data on a municipal website, could we use any data sets from Stats Canada? Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to go into that a bit more on where the data sets come from. They come from Statistics Canada. They can come from internal data sets like the municipal census. They could come from electricity utility providers. They can come from open data portals. They can come from CMHC. I have a very big list of data sources, which I'm happy to share with everyone afterwards. But to give you context, we source from about over 50 data sets in Canada, or data sources in Canada, and then we consolidate that into a central platform. And they can also come from the community data catalog as well. And that's something that's totally possible as well. Another question is, what software APIs are we using to visualize the data from Excel table to graphs? So what we do is we use something called HighCharts. It's a JavaScript library. Basically, how it works, the process works, if you send us raw data, we'll take care of the legwork of getting it transformed and visualized. And then what ends up happening is you get an output that looks like this, that can go on your municipal website. So in this case, if we were working with community data, whatever data that the community data portal has, we can take that data, transform it, and then add it within a format that makes sense, that you see here. A lot of people ask, like, how hard is it to add to your website? Incredibly easy. This is a client in Miami County, Kansas. This is basically her email saying, I love it. And that it literally took her less than 5 minutes to do. I will get to the neighborhood example in a bit. But what I want, oh God, I'm showcasing a lot of terrible code stuff. Sorry about that. But what I want to illustrate is how easy it is to install on a website. So this is the community data website for my webinar with you guys. And basically, a lot of people ask, is it hard to install on a website? It's actually not really easy. You just add one line of code. It's called an iframe. You add that in, and then suddenly your website has dynamic data. So I wanted to illustrate that it's not hard to install this kind of technology. A question is, do you have examples of profiles for a city that has multiple neighborhoods? We are capable of doing it. I don't have a live example because we haven't worked with any larger cities. But we do have like data on the dissemination area, also neighborhood level data area. I know the community data portal has that information where we can convert that. So that is possible, where we can basically create neighborhood profiles with a similar format that you see with demographics here, but also broken down to neighborhood level. That's something we're capable of doing, but we don't have any live examples yet, just because no one's really asked for it yet. But it is something we're capable of doing. And someone also asked, is the data that we have accessible friendly? Does it meet AODA guidelines? 100% it does. We had to, because we are embedded with about 300 municipal websites across Canada, we also ended up working with a lot of website providers. So the company we worked with, eSolutions Group, when we first heard about these disability or accessibility requirements, we were sure to use we were sure to hit those requirements, and we do. So we are compliant with that as well, if you guys are curious. Is there a list of municipalities that visualize data in this way that we can view as examples? Neighborhoods. If you're referring to neighborhoods, no. I can send something privately for you to view. Go ahead.
I think you were just looking for a list of clients.
So
if you want to just sort of, if you, I think David really be able to show you a suggestion of somebody who's really comparable to you. So I would suggest that if you want to contact him directly, or even type it in right now and say, like, how big is your city? What province are you in? And he can probably give you a very close example.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I can do is you can either type it in or I can send it to you afterwards, just because there's a lot of examples, and I can give you the full list, and then you can kind of go from that. Can the data be projected hidden from a focus view? Yes, it can be. Yeah. We've had people want to hide data and just keep it viewed internally, and whatnot. Brantford. Okay. You know what? I'll instead of me pulling up a bunch of new tabs, what I'll do is I'll send everyone a private email afterwards if you have specific questions with actual examples, just because there's quite a bit. But what I want to do is go over some of the other tools that we have as well. So one of the tools that we've been asked for quite a bit was the ability. Oh, Northern Ontario. Actually, I'm from Northern Ontario, so I grew up in Timmins. But we work with like Hearst and Val Hardy region. So there's a few ones that I can send to you guys in private afterwards. So what I want to get to was, outside of what you saw with like our technology with visualizing data, we also want the ability to make some of this data useful from an analytics perspective. So we have this comparison tool, and someone just asked me, where is the data stored? All on Canadian servers for us, and American has American servers. We have a server in Toronto, that's where it's being stored. So if you guys are worried about data privacy laws, which I know is a very gray area, anything Canadian is stored within the Canadian side of the country. So we also developed this analytics tool that was requested from other municipalities. What you're able to do with this tool is compare various indicators. So let's say you want to compare like marital status and stuff like that, you can as well. I just have Regina and Saskatoon here as an easy example. But if you want to add, say, maybe Kelowna, we can add Kelowna to that mix. And then you can compare like period of immigration data. So we've turned some of the census data into useful formats that you can use. You can also change the chart graph to an area. Maybe if you want a line chart. The pie graph probably won't work best for this, but you can. You can also download the chart as a PNG. So if you were making a report or whatnot, you can easily do that, as you can see here. And like any data that you have, like with your community data consortium, this is stuff that we can look to add as well. But you kind of get a sense when I show you employment rates, unemployment rates. Some of the larger centers have monthly data. We can definitely add that. Average rent, which looks bad as a pie chart, but you can see you can kind of get a sense of what we're able to do with some of this data and make it a bit more useful. One other product that we're starting to develop, but it's in beta, is the benchmark tool. So you can kind of get a sense of like what community has the lowest median age, employment rates, population, participation rates. But that's in beta, just because we're adding more data as we go along with this. A lot of people ask though, like, how do you do or manage your data? It's a complicated process. I'm not going to show you the actual technical stuff because that gets a bit too nerdy. But what we have is an ETL process again, and we just do a lot of extraction, transforming, loading that ends up feeding our platform. So as an example, outside of, if we can use community data as a partner to facilitate that with you guys. But as an example of what we do today, in the US, we have a client that, they want data from the Kansas City Regional Association of Realtors. This data comes out on a monthly basis. You can download the report. It comes in a format like that, like this. It's not the most friendliest, but if you extract the data and use it and put it in a format that is friendly, it becomes very powerful. So in this particular case, they wanted average sales price, but we parsed the whole data. This is their website, Miami County, Kansas. And then basically they have the latest housing price here. So there are ways we can basically extract data, and that's kind of on a high level how we do it. It's a lot of technology that we use in the background. In a nutshell, that's kind of our technology. That's how we use our data. That's how we visualize our data. That's how we transform our data. So what I want to say, if you guys had any specific questions right now for me or Mary, I'm happy to answer. And hopefully my demo is a bit educational in terms of what we do today.
Davey, can you just take a minute and describe sort of a standard client agreement, sort of, your length of time and sort of estimates of costs and stuff for people so they would have an idea of what that would look like if they were interested in using Townfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So every client's a little different. So we have a base price of about 2,000 to 3,000 a year. And then depending on what you add on top, like depending on the data that you want internally, that kind of increments the price a little bit. But most of so I'll give you context, like Chestermere, the city of Chestermere. We started working with them probably last month. They gave us a list of data sources. They came in various formats. Their total cost was about $5K, I think. And then basically we took all the data they provided and the data that we aggregate on our end, and then basically visualized everything and put it into a format like this that they're able to use and add on top of into their website. So an engagement. Oh, go ahead.
So, and your turnaround time, like from the time that Chestermere and you sort of came together, this is within a month. This is now on their website.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So it took a month minus Christmas holiday break. But basically, we started engaging them at around mid-November. It took us probably 2 weeks to get everything set up. And then it was like some verification on their end. And once that was verified, we basically put it live at the start of this month. And it was super easy to get it on the website, less than 5 minutes to do. It was just a matter of just verifying if the visualizations made sense.
Awesome. And then one of the things that I think is interesting that we spoke about was the idea that like then on a monthly basis, this stuff is being updated without, continued work between Townfolio and the cities, but that's just kind of built into what's going on your end. And then
yes,
contracts are sort of 1 to 3 to 5 years in length. Is that right?
Yeah, so we have an annual subscription, but we offer you can subscribe to a 3-year plan, and there's some discounts associated with that. So that's normally how we work. There's a question here in terms of items that we're interested if you can find this data relevant to our community. Yes, that is possible. There is a bit of a cost sometimes associated with that, depending on how difficult it is. But an example would be the city of Prince Albert. They wanted health data that they couldn't find themselves, and we were able to scour the internet and found out that it was in annual reports for the health regions. So we had to parse that information. So that's normally how it works for us on that end.
Cool.
are you able to get custom geography data? Um, that's a great question. You're probably referring to like boundary data, if I understand correctly,
Yeah, usually
Alexandre?
within our group. Yeah, so a lot of our group. Alexandra, what area are you from? A lot of them have Fort McMurray. Okay, so a lot of them have different neighborhoods that don't really align with the standard Statistics Canada geographies, and because our
Yeah.
groups tend to be looking at sort of smaller neighborhood level data, that's often a problem. And so one of the big added value things that comes with the community data program is that we actually order the StatsCan data for their particular geographies. And so,
Okay.
Alexander, this is a great example, I think, of the potential to use your sort of make more use out of your community data program stuff and get it visualized basically by people who are experts doing it.
Yeah, so that's a excellent case example of a partnership with community data and Townfolio to use some of that custom geography data and those boundaries to illustrate and visualize for your own use case scenarios. We've done a bit of work with some other clients where they have disagreements with the boundary that StatsCan has set, and we've manipulated some of the boundaries for that. But it'd be a good example to do with CDP. How did Townfolio find out about CDP? Actually, at the very beginning, I've heard about him just because we've worked with a few clients that have been part of consortiums. I think Niagara Workforce Planning Board. We work with Mario and there. So I've heard about them before, but Mary actually reached out to me. I think it was like 2 months ago or something like that, Mary.
Yeah, there was something came across my desk from Camfolio that had come through because CDP is developing a sort of new home within the Canadian CD network with the Canadian Community Economic Development Network. And so through them, we sort of were introduced to, hey, there's this startup called Townfolio. Is this something that is interesting to us? Is there, are they? I think the big question was, hey, is this somebody doing the same thing we are? So we sort of just got into touch to see, like, hey, what are you guys doing? And it seems like we are very compatible, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. Match made in heaven.
That's
Um,
right.
um, question here is if a client wants to make a change to their community profile or add new data, or just are there additional costs? Or are clients able to self-serve any changes to their community profiles? Yeah, there are some functionality that you're able to self-serve. And actually, surprisingly, I did not go over that, which I should have. So one of the things here, can you guys still see my screen? I'm going to double check that. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. There's a dashboard here where you're able to basically manipulate some of the contents of the profile. Sometimes there's something called manage your charts or upload or add images. So if you want to manage your chart, you can easily do that. So it will load up this portal here, and you can hide or show it. You can edit the descriptions. You can create a new chart. You can change the colors. So yeah, there is some capabilities. Depending on the user, though, sometimes we just do it on their behalf. It's not a big cost. It's just it's part of something we call an onboarding fee, depending on like what you want to see on the system. And then we'll usually facilitate just to make it easier because we generally are able to do it faster with some Python programming. But you are able to edit some of the components yourself if you are curious. And the other question is, have you integrated data collected by the municipality or region within the data you have available? We are capable. The biggest problem or question is, how do we access the data? In an ideal scenario, APIs would be amazing, but not everyone has an API. So sometimes what Chestermere does, or we're actually talking to another community in BC on how to do this, is they plan on setting us just raw data formats or raw data sets on a monthly basis, whether that's CSV, XML, whatever format, and then we'll just take that data and parse it and put it through our extract, transform, load process to get to the final output of a visualization. So Um, in a sense, we have integrated with municipalities and regions that collect their own proprietary data, but it just depends on how that connection looks like. Hopefully that answered your question, Michael, and Calgary. Perfect. Do anyone else have other questions for me? Going once, going twice. Oh.
We're going to panic now and just ask random questions.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like to answer questions and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I think that there's a lot of crossover between CDP and Townfolio. I think there's a lot of potential for our members to really sort of just make use of their community data and to get a better visualization in front of them, particularly for the small and medium-sized cities. I know this is something that our members struggle with if you don't have the capacity in-house to get this done. And there's all this data sitting there that is fantastic, but unless you get it in an easy-to-use format, it's never going to get used. So I think that's great. And we are actually going to connect with Townfolio's clients on Thursday and let them know about the community data program as well. So this would be a big week for community data and Townfolio.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I'm doing a webinar with community data here is just I saw so many synergies with a lot of the data that you guys have as part of their agreement with them. And there's a good way of extracting a lot of the data that exists in these consortiums and making it useful as well. So there's a lot of application from that perspective. Alexandra had a question regarding the cost component. Since she had a fire alarm, hopefully you are okay and that there's no fire and that if there is a fire, please get to safety.
You can answer questions at another time.
Absolutely. In terms of cost, there's a base cost of about $22,000 to $3,000 a year, and then it just depends on what it looks like visually, like what kind of customizations or additional data sets you want on top of that. So that's usually on a case-by-case basis. But if you have any further questions, feel free to shoot me an email there. Let me see here. How is Townfolio connected with community data?
I just sort of follow up, Davey, on the cost component. It sounds like the contracts are fairly flexible, and so while there's sort of base rates, which are based on your population, so if you're smaller, you're looking at a more affordable fee, which is great, and then the potential to work that cost up higher to have more service, and that's all pretty flexible. The team is pretty responsive, I think, to their clients. So I think there's a lot of potential for anybody who's looking at this.
Yeah, and we set the pricing like that because, like for example, like a Toronto would just have way more data than maybe an Orangeville. So it's just a lot of the pricing is also dependent on what data is available to the public. And if it's easily accessible like it is for Toronto, and there's way more data, there's just more upfront work to do a lot of the ETL work. But if there's not, it's the price generally tends to be a bit lower. How is Townfolio connected with CDP? That's a great question, Martin. Mary, do you have any answers to that?
I mean,
tackle that one.
On paper, there's no connection. On paper, there is just we've had a few conversations and are very intrigued by what each other are doing. So we don't have a formal relationship. I think there's a possibility in the future to have one. But for now, we just really wanted to make sure that you all found out about Townfolio. And so we are just hosting Townfolio and in the common good of promoting the use of data to make your cities better.
Yeah. And absolutely. And I think like on paper is nothing connected, but I mean, it's something from our end. We're super interested in working with community data. As that relationship develops, that's something we can keep you all updated on how that connection would look specifically.
For sure.
Kendra, what is your experience working with IT communication departments at municipalities to get it up on a website? Is it generally a smooth process? Very smooth. It's super simple. Normally how it works is whoever the key contact is, they'll usually refer me off to their IT department. I'll have a quick conversation with them on how to integrate it. It's pretty easy. And once they have that one line of code, it's easy to implement. And it usually takes IT less than a day to turn it around. Normally how it works is, let me see if I can pull up an email real quick just to give you a bit of a sense of how that worked. So what I normally do is I'll send a mock-up to the key contact saying, I think this is where it looks best on a website. So when they pass that off to IT, as Seth did to their IT person, they basically, Katie had no problem adding it to the website like a day later. So this is recent and it's super easy to implement. It's not hard to do.
Davey, your voice is fading in and out. It kind of sounds like you've gone underwater.
Oh,
there you're back again.
Okay, apologies. What I was saying, it's super easy to implement. It's not hard. And what I normally do is I send this code in the email, and then normally I send a mock-up of what it looks like. So the working with IT is really easy, or communication. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's good to know. A lot of our members that are part of municipal governments end up having struggles and pushback from IT, and definitely slows things down. And I think IT gets frustrated sometimes. So that's great.
Yeah, we made it super easy with IT, and like the fact that we're like accessibility compliant and they're able to check it, it's pretty easy. And like I said, all they have to do is literally add one line of code like this, and then bam, you have data visualized on your website.
Very cool.
Any other questions?
All right, well, while we are waiting for any other questions to come through, you guys have Davey's email up there, so please feel free to send him any direct follow-up emails, particularly if you're looking for those examples of anybody using data who's close to you or a similar size city. If you have a particular focus that you'd be interested in seeing, please feel free to ask him about that too. And he'll try to share a very sort of targeted example or follow up and have a conversation with you about what the potential there is. You can also send any messages to me. I'll put up my email address there, just mary@communitydata.ca. If there's anything I can help you with. And also, I'd love to hear if you are interested in CDP pursuing a greater relationship with Townfolio and what you think that might look like. Please feel free to send me a direct message about that, because I think this is definitely a potential thing that we can get into. And in the meantime, I hope you guys look into this, because I think it's really great potential for just making more use of your data. And we will have, can you, David, do you want to send me your slides after this too? We'll get that up on the website and let people.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll give you the slides, and and then you can have that as well. And then my email is there. If you guys want to call me anytime, I'll put my phone number as well. Alexandre, you have a quick question here. Do we work with government agencies for grant purposes? That's an interesting one. We have worked with departments that have used grants. I think that's something you would have to chat with me a bit more further. But we have done it a bit, but we just need a bit more context of what you're looking for to do specifically. But with that said, you guys have my email and my phone number there. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I'd love to hear how you guys would imagine us working with community data. I'd love to hear that. And obviously letting Mary know that as well, because I'm excited at the potential possibilities that we could work together. And thank you for attending this webinar.
Well, thank you very much, Davey. We will come to a formal close now. So thank you everybody for attending. You can watch your inbox for follow-up from the from this webinar. We'll make sure those slides and contact information gets sent to you again. And our next webinar is going to be next week. We're going to hear from a gentleman in Ottawa from the Social Planning Council about working with 3D Excel mapping. So really intriguing, much more of a sort of hands-on tool if you want to get some insight into how to use Excel to make maps. So if you can join us for that, just go on the website and register for that for the next week. So thank you everybody very much. And I will hang out here for a few more minutes if you have any last minute questions.